Okay, we're going to be talking about the math on the HiSET, and I'm going to share with you a great math shortcut that every math student needs to know. Okay, so just right off the bat, if you're not familiar with my channel, I do a ton of videos on HiSET, task, GED, and a lot of other math topics. My background is I'm a math teacher, but I've also worked extensively in adult education in terms of helping people pass these exams. So really, what I want to share with you is extremely valuable. If you're struggling with the HiSET or the math that's on it and you need some more kind of a structured, formal course, I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video on my full HiSET math course. You might want to check that out at the end of this video. But let's get right into this. I'm going to say one other thing. On my YouTube channel, I've done another video that goes over this same tip as well. But with that being said, let's get right to it. Now, on the HiSET, you're going to be dealing with a lot of algebra and geometry, okay? Now, a lot of people don't realize that algebra, for example, okay, is obviously the subject of algebra, but you also got to do a lot of algebra in geometry as well. Okay, that's why this geometry course generally comes after algebra. But before you could do either one of these, you have to be very good at arithmetic, right? Just basically like basic elementary and middle school math, calculating, working with numbers. And probably the one thing that students hate the most, just don't like, including myself, they're just like, oh, I just don't like dealing with is what? Fractions. People don't like fractions, okay? So I can understand why. Listen, I can think back already 40 years when I was in elementary school, and well, maybe longer than that even, and just doing fractions and being like, oh, this is just kind of like a pain. So the thing about it though is fractions are a reality. Fractions are everywhere in mathematics, and you're gonna see them definitely on the HiSET. So you have to have a real mastery of them. So what I'm going to share with you is a nice shortcut about fractions. Now, one of the things that I'm going to say before I share the shortcut with you is the following. Let's suppose you have an equation like this. Now, we're not going to solve this equation, okay? But let's suppose you did have this equation. I'm going to make a point here, and you'll see why. What a lot of students tend to do, and this is not something you should do when you're doing algebra, okay? Is they'll take these fractions and they'll be like, oh, I'm not dealing with these fractions. Forget that. I'm not messing with these. So what they'll do, they'll take their calculator and they'll turn these guys into decimals. So like 2/3 is like 0.6 x, and then they'll just divide the numerator by the denominator, and they'll turn this whole thing into a decimal equivalent, and they'll work with their calculator. So I've seen this a lot. The problem with that is you're going to start getting estimations. You're not going to have, generally speaking, there are exceptions, but for most problems, you're going to end up getting a decimal that's not the exact answer, and you may not recognize it, especially on a multiple choice question. Okay, so or on the fill-in, they may not want it in decimal form. So you need to know how to work with fractions is the bottom line. Okay, and if you do see fractions, don't turn them into decimals. Now, I will say this, it's probably going to be the complete opposite of what I just told you. If you totally forgot how to deal with fractions and you're like, I forgot fractions completely, then if you do convert your fractions into decimals and work with them, at least that might get you uh, into a point where you might be able to, figure out what the right answer is maybe in a multiple choice situation. So it's better than not doing the problem or just straight guessing. Let's just say. So, but with that being said, though, because there's so many fractions in math, geometry, algebra, arithmetic, you got to know them. So let's get right to it, and I'll share with you what the shortcut is. Now, fractions. What do you have to do with fractions? These are the basic skills, and I'm going to share with you the one that the shortcut here in a second, but I got to frame this out first. So the first thing is you need to know obviously what a fraction is, but the one skill that you for sure need to know how to do is reduce a fraction. Very simple. If you have 10 over 20, you don't want to leave that fraction in that form. You need to know how to reduce it. That's simply the fraction 1/2. I'm not going to teach you that. If you need more extensive instruction on that, you can check out my course. This isn't difficult. Obviously, this is a very easy problem, but if you have a more complex fraction, let's say like something like that, then you might, there's a little bit more to it. But reducing or simplifying fractions is a skill that you need to know. This is not what the shortcut's about, but I'm just going to do a quick overview of the skills that you should have already with fractions. Now, the next one is multiplying fractions, okay? And we just write them out here, multiplying. Well, you got to know how to divide. And the last over here is add and subtract. Okay, multiplying fractions. This is super easy, okay? Let's say we have 2/3 times 1/5. So, by the way, I'm not doing any mixed numbers here. Again, there's a little bit more. There's a few things here that I'm kind of skipping, but just want to make some general points here. So, got to know how to reduce. When you multiply, it's very easy. All you do is multiply the numerators and the denominators together. So here, the answer, 2/3 times 1/5 is 2 times 1 is 2, and then 3 times 5 is 15. Very easy, okay? So multiplying fractions is like, okay, as long as you remember that, right? You shouldn't have any too much difficulty on it. Now, by the way, too, let's suppose I had x over y times z over w. So algebraically, if you had to like write this, determine what the answer is, the product, you just do the same thing. So our answer is xz. That's means a multiplication when we put two variables together. Okay, that's the product. Xz over yw. Okay. So this works with variables along with numbers. Very, very straightforward. Now let's do division. So let's do 2/3 this time divided by 1/5. This is also very easy to do. When we do division of fractions, all you do is we're going to convert this into a multiplication problem. So we're not going to do a division problem. We're going to flip this guy, the fraction to the right of the division symbol. We're going to flip it upside down, and this turns this into a multiplication problem. So this problem is equivalent to this problem, 2/3 times, right? I'm not going to deal with division, times, and I'm going to flip this upside down. So the 5 is going to go on top and the 1 is going to go on bottom. It's called a reciprocal, okay? All it is just flipping this fraction upside down. Now, we already know how to multiply fractions. I just told you how to do that. So now we just go ahead and multiply this problem. So this is going to be 2 times 5 is 10 over 3 times 1 is 3, and we're done. So already right here, if you know generally how to reduce fractions, multiplying and dividing fractions are not too difficult, right? So think about with the topic of fractions, we've already covered how to reduce, multiply, and divide. And I did that like in, 5 minutes or something like that. It's very straightforward. Now, we're coming to the good part. Here's where people struggle, all right? Adding and subtracting fractions. So if I have, say, like 2 7s plus 2/5, this is where students go, oh my goodness. Now, what I do see a lot of common mistakes is, first of all, they'll start using the steps for multiplication and for division for adding and subtracting fractions. The steps to add a fraction is the same steps to subtract a fraction. Now, this is where all that lowest common denominator stuff comes in. Or like, oh yeah, I remember that. I got to figure out what the lowest common denominator is, and I got to change the fractions and all that kind of good stuff. Now, if you know how to do that, that's great, but don't leave the video yet, because uh, what I'm going to share with you comes in very substantially when we're dealing with variables. Okay, so in algebra, you're dealing with fractions, but oftentimes those fractions have variables in them. So, you know, you're going to have to understand this step anyways. So here, generally what you would do is you would figure out what the LCD is. I'm not going to teach you that. You need to know how to do that anyways, okay? The lowest common denominator is 35, all right? Okay, so here I had to multiply this guy by 5. So if I multiply the denominator by 5, I'm going to multiply the numerator by 5. So this is going to, I have to rewrite this fraction as 10 over 35 plus, here I had to multiply this by 7 to get 35. And this, I have to multiply this numerator by 7, so this is going to be 14. Now, when you have the same denominator, we have what we call common denominators. I can simply add the numerator. So our answer is going to be 28 over 35. Very simple, straightforward. And if this was a subtraction problem, I would simply subtract the numerators. Okay, same procedure though. But again, where people, like start going crazy, they're like, oh my gosh, fractions, it's the LCD thing. Okay, now if they're not, or if they're like, oh yeah, that doesn't bother me, generally what's going on is they're applying the steps from multiplying and dividing fractions for adding and subtracting, so their answer is going to be completely off. And by the way too, when you're dealing with a multiple choice question, trust me, they're going to have your wrong answer there for you to choose. That's how teachers are. Teachers, like for me, when I work with students, or teach them or whatnot, I've been doing it for so long, I already know the wrong steps they're going to take before they even do the problem. That's what that's just from a lot of experience and being a quote unquote professional. You're like, okay, because why? Because most students make those same mistakes, and they understand things, generally, in a similar kind of way, because logically they're like, oh, if I do this and this, they might, kind of get an answer, but it's incorrect. So another thing, for example, let's say if this is adding these two, they might just simply add. 2 plus 2 is 4, let's say, for example, and 7 plus 5 would be 12. And then, of course, it would reduce that answer. Guarantee you on a multiple choice exam that your nice answer here, 1/3, will be there for you to select and get that wrong. So just because you recognize your answer on the multiple choice questions, for example, it doesn't mean that you're right. And that's another thing too. If you're impatient, you're like, okay, this is the answer. Oh, look, I see my answer. No, not the case. All right, so let's get to the magical shortcut here. So I already went over the basic steps of adding and subtracting fractions when there's when the denominators are not the same. Now, what I'm going to show you, matter of fact, let's go and break this down like right here. So that was 2/7 plus 2/5, I believe. Let me just double check that. Okay, 2/7 plus 2/5. So how do we do this using the shortcut? Well, I kind of refer to this as the bow tie method, all right? Because it looks kind of like a bow tie, right? Like a bow tie looks something like that. I kind of think of that pattern here when we do this. So this works with adding and subtracting fractions, and here's how it goes, okay? We're going to multiply this way. All right, I'm going to show you the steps here in a second. We're going to multiply this way, and we're going to multiply this way. So you can kind of see a little bit of that bow tie pattern in there. Anyways, so let's get to it. So the first direction you want to go is this direction. Whoops, let me change that back. Get my highlighter back. Okay, so here's what you want to do. You start from the bottom right corner. You're going to go this diagonal, okay? So 5 times 2 is what? It's 10, right? So you're going to write that there. Now, this is an addition problem, so we're going to write an addition symbol right there, okay? Now, the next step is the other diagonal, so we're going to go this direction. So 7 times 2, we're going to write that answer there, and that is what? 14, okay? So this constructs our numerator, the top part of the fraction, okay? This side being multiplied together is the first number. Remember, this is very specific too. This is the first number. In other words, you can't go 7 times 2 and write that as that being the first number, because that's going to mess us up in subtraction. So follow these steps exactly. So this is the first step, this is the second step, okay? The first result goes there, the second result goes there. Okay, we're almost done, all right? To get our denominator, all we do is multiply this way. So 7 times 5 is 35. Now this should look pretty familiar to us because I just did this problem using, the more straightforward technique. Now we got to obviously clean it up. So 10 plus 14 is 24 over 35. Okay, and I believe that's what I wrote here when I did this, right? So we change this to 35. 35 and multiply this by 5, I get 10 here, 7 here, that's 14. I'm pretty sure I don't know if I wrote 28 or 20. If I did, I made an error, but anyways, the answer is 24 over 35, okay? So you can see here, same answer, much direct way. Now, let's talk about another advantage of doing this problem, okay, the way I just did it. What if I had this scenario, okay? What if I had A over B plus C over X, and you wanted to algebraically add these two fractions? Well, what's the lowest common denominator? Well, it happens to be BX, but let's say you didn't even know that. You could just follow these same steps here. This times this, right, is what? AX, A times X is AX plus, let's go ahead and do this now. B times C is BC over, and get our denominator, BX. And this is the correct answer, okay? So when you're dealing with variable fractions, this is very easy. You need to know this technique, okay? This is extremely powerful. Now, there is one drawback on this, on just simply not finding the LCD and converting your fractions like this. There is one drawback, and that is oftentimes when you're dealing with other numbers. Let's say we had a problem. Let me just give you an example. Let's say I had 10 over 30 plus 25 over 75. All right. Now, what would not be a smart way to do this problem is to just go and just do the technique I just showed you. Okay. Now, why is that not the case? Maybe some of you have already figured out. Well, because these fractions are simplified, they're not reduced. You always want to reduce each fraction down, reduce as much as you can before you do a fraction problem. So here, for example, 10 over 30 is 1/3, 25 over 75 is also 1/3, okay? Now you can go ahead and just do the problem, right? Here, hopefully you'll recognize this answer is simply 2/3. You wouldn't do it here. You always want to simplify. Well, one of the things that can happen when you're doing this bow tie technique is you can come up with an answer. Your final answer might be something like, say, 50 over 200, okay? Versus if you just did it using a lowest common denominator, you might have a fully reduced problem. So if you had 50 over 200, okay, you need to kind of reduce that down, right? So this would be actually 1/4, right? Is your final answer. So sometimes using that bow tie technique, you'll get the answer mathematically correct. Your value will be correct, but it may not be fully simplified. So that's why you need to know how to reduce. Not all the times, sometimes. Okay, but when it comes to dealing with variable fractions, it's very powerful. You need to know this technique. Okay, so what I just showed you here, if we just look at fractions in general, if you know generally how to reduce, and then multiplying and dividing is pretty straightforward, easy. I just gave you a technique to add and subtract. So even if you forgot how to figure out what the LCD is, you can still do it. Think about it. What if I gave you a problem like so? We'll get to this last part of this video. What if I gave you 103 over 792 plus 99 over 301? And I wanted that answer in fraction form. You would have to try to figure out what the lowest common denominator is between these two denominators. That right there in and of itself could be pretty challenging. Okay, involves a lot of factoring, etc., etc. However, what you could do is just go and use that bow tie technique. This times this, plus this times this, over this times this, and then from there, try to simplify and reduce. All right. So anyways, it is a powerful technique. Trust me, even if you weren't that impressed with it, believe me, this is something I use all the time. It's something you need to know. And again, let me go ahead and just wrap this up. If you're not a subscriber, I hope you are a subscriber or choose to subscribe. I do a lot of videos on this kind of stuff. I've done a video on this about how to deal with fractions. I believe the title is How to Deal with Fractions in 7 Minutes. It's pretty popular. It's helped a lot of folks out. So it covers a lot of what we talked about. So hopefully you'll choose to check out that video by becoming a subscriber, and make sure you hit that bell notification so you get my latest videos. And if you enjoyed the video and you feel like you got a lot of value in it, I would appreciate a thumbs up. And please comment. I get a lot of comments on my videos, but it's the only way I know that I'm helping you out, if I'm kind of hitting the right tone. Again, my goal with these videos is to help you reach your goal in math. Hey, listen, I know math, right? Well, at least, I don't know everything, but I know a lot of math. Do I need to take exams? Do I need to pass course? No, I'm beyond that. So what I'm doing is giving back, right? I'm a math teacher. I want to help you get better by passing on experience and passing on skills that you need to know. So although I don't respond to all the comments, I just get too many. I do read them so I can figure out what I can do to, what information I can share to make you a better math student. So with that being said, I wish you all the best. And by the way, one last reminder, if you need more help with the HiSET, okay, you can check out my actual full complete course. Just check out, I'll leave the link in the description in the video below. But with that being said, I thank you for your time and have a great day.